We're going to talk about sustainable weight loss. I think you all have probably tried to lose weight at some point in your life and probably put it back on again. There's a reason for it. There's a way to do it and a way not to do it. Dr. Kate Delahunty is going to tell you.
Thank you. There we go. Well, welcome. What a great talk. I'm fascinated. I can't wait to talk to the gentleman before me after I'm finished. Sustainable weight loss, interesting subject. I mean, one of the biggest things about this whole topic is that, for eons, we've literally been treating weight loss as a singular difficulty that people have. We haven't really opened up and looked at all the other factors that we can look at in order to really make sure that people get an amazing result. They come into the clinic and they want to lose weight, except there's so many other things going on that we need to look at. Leaky gut, for instance, or they've just got massive inflammation, they've got lots of difficulties, and yet all we're trying to do is treat the weight issue. And so we don't get very far with that because they have some results perhaps in the first instance, but I mean, let's face it, how many people in here have been on a diet? How many people? Okay. How many people have lost significant amounts of weight? Anybody? How many people have put it back on in 6 months to a year? And how many people have put that weight back on and often put a lot more weight back on than what you originally started with? Okay. Well, that's all about this preventative kind of medicine track that we're going down. We have to look at a whole bunch of different things in order to succeed. I had a wonderful experience about 6 months ago. I was in a clinic. I had a lady come in and they fill out quite an extensive document for me so I can understand a little bit more about who they are, where they're coming from, how they eat, what their ailments are, and what they want to achieve when they come and see me. Anyway, I was going through this document. I always take about 15, 20 minutes before I see the patient, and I go through the document. And I go to the very last page, and always I'm curious as to how they've kind of summed up why they've come to see me. And in this case, this lady said, I'd like to lose weight, and I'd like to feel better. And I thought, great. So went and got her out of the waiting room, brought her in. We were going through the documentation, and we were talking about all the things that she wanted to do. And of course, one of the issues with regard to was very much wanted to lose weight. She probably had about 40 pounds. And I was talking to her, and I just got the impression she wasn't paying attention to me. She just wasn't really listening to me. And we got to the end, and I said, so you want to lose weight, you want to feel better, and we're going to explore a bunch of possibilities. She said, yes. And I said, is there something else? Am I missing something? I feel like there's something else you want to tell me. And she leans over the table. Honestly, it took everything I could not to laugh. She leans over the table, and she was a little lady. She was about 4'8". And she leans over, she goes, no, the reason I'm here is because I want you to help me be taller. And I said, taller? Like what? Taller? She said, yes, but I've heard all these things about losing fat and losing muscle, and if I lose muscle, I'll be shorter. And I was like, no, it's okay. We're just going to lose fat. We're going to lose fat around your belly, and this is how it's going to go. And the bonus is that when you lose your 40 pounds, you're going to stand upright, and you're going to feel tall. She goes, ooh, I'd like that. So there you go. So let's kind of dispel some of the myths and kind of work out where we're going here with that. Okay, so first of all, I want to bring that over here. Okay, first of all, how many Americans are on a diet each year? Well, right now, this is the current information that we've got. 45 million Americans go on a diet each year, and they spend $33 billion. Interesting. Obviously, people who are in weight loss are cashing it in. People kind of lose a little bit of weight, and then they go back and they buy the products, or they buy the services, or they do what they need to do, and then they're back there contributing to this dollar value. So nearly 2/3 of Americans are overweight or they're obese. It's obviously a chronic disease, and it's not just because we eat too much. It's because of all the other things that are going on with regard to our health. So again, coming back to the point that we have to look at the bigger picture with regard to the treatment of this. So annual spend, again, from the market data guys, they're just telling us right now that it's skyward of $60 billion annually. So it's crazy. And, it covers gym memberships, weight loss programs, drinking diet soda. How many people do you see drink diet soda that are actually in good shape? Most of them aren't. And what's rather interesting is we finally learned, or we've kind of got an essence now, that drinking diet soda, as a matter of fact, makes you fat because of the artificial sweeteners and all the goodies that are in there that shouldn't be in there. So industry net worth, again, just $68.2 billion in 2017, and it's going to continue to rise in upwards of, $70 billion in the not too distant future. So there is a lot of dollars being spent in this industry. Sustained weight loss. So the vast majority of diets do not lead to sustained weight loss. What they do lead to is a rampant preoccupation with food and weight. Again, how many people have been on a diet and then what do? All you think about is what you're going to eat. All you're thinking about is the next meal. And as a matter of fact, what's really funny is what's the very first thing you do when you think you're going to go on a diet? You go look what's in the fridge. Yeah, you're just covering your bases. You want to make sure just in case you've got it, just in case you want to go get it. So we're living in a toxic cultural thin ideal, body dissatisfaction, and a really, really just disordered eating. The number of young girls that I have come in, and interestingly enough, often it's the mother that will bring the daughter in and say she needs to lose weight. And I've been trying to cut her carbs to zero, and I've been trying to do this, and I've been trying to do that, and this kid is not performing at school. She can't think. She has no carbs to think. She's, it's crazy. But we're just so preoccupied with this particular situation. So it often does harm, Long-term studies show, which is what we've just been talking about. 1 to 2/3 of the weight come back within a year, and usually you actually put more on. So what we want to do, I'm going to put all these up here so they don't get out here. First of all, how do we lose fat and how do we retain muscle? Well, firstly and foremostly, the most important thing is that we come from a preventative perspective. So what we have to do is we have to look at the bigger picture. We have to look at how these people eat, how they've learned to eat, where they're going with it. We have to look at the inflammatory markers, which we'll talk about later. Why are they inflamed? Why isn't their body doing what it needs to do? The body is an it's just such a smart organism. And if we kind of try not to interfere too much, but we give it what it needs, it will congratulate you. It will do the things it needs you to do. So I'm kind of known in my industry, I'm a less is more kid. I like to treat people nutritively, and then I want to see where the cards fall at the end of the weight loss process, or certainly halfway through it. I want to see if the same deficiencies that I identified at the beginning, do they exist in the middle or the end of the weight loss program? So I want to have a look at that. Now, one of the things that we do, or I've been working with a diet called the T360. How many people here are familiar with that? Awesome. It's something that's come from the Transformations group, and essentially it's a ketogenic diet. Now, how many people know about ketogenic diets? Okay, there have been some massive misnomers. This is not a traditional ketogenic in terms of how it works. It actually provides a regular level of healthy fat, not this crazy tipped out version of it, adequate protein, and it also provides carbs. It provides a situation where what we're trying to do is avoid processed carbohydrates, maintain healthy blood sugar levels, pinpoint food intolerances. We want to make sure that as a ketogenic story, we're using belly fat as a majority of the fuel that we need in order to do what we need to do, as opposed to using some glucose after we've had our food and then converting the rest or storing it. And of course, postmenopausally, that's just something that just gets worse and worse and worse for ladies as we get older. What we want to look is how to have corrective food habits. I mean, some of the things that are the absolute crux of health. For instance, eating slowly. I mean, how many people scarf their food? How many people seagull eat? So how many times have you sat down to a meal, eaten the meal? Excuse me. I did right here. Better. Had the meal and then realized you looked down and you thought, where the heck did that go? I forgot that I even ate it. I don't know how that happened. So again, teaching people proper habits where they're sitting down, they're actually taking the fork, putting the food in their mouth, and then putting the implement down, and now chewing the food and thinking about it, consciously eating, not subconsciously eating. And interestingly enough, that's one of the greatest contributors to actually keeping weight off forever, because you're giving your digestion a break. You're allowing it to do what it needs to do without this seagull eating, this gulping, which is what we have a tendency. Of course, throw some stress factors in on there, and it just makes it all the more worse. Pinpoint food intolerances. Again, my goodness, if you're eating food that is inappropriate for you, that does not work for you, then again, your body's going to become, it's going to hold on. It's not going to let go and rejoice in the fact that it wants to be healthy. So when you're going on to, you're buying all these weight loss products, you're getting involved in all of this. If we don't have this other information about you as an individual, what might be appropriate for you is not appropriate for you in terms of what you eat. They might both be classified as good food. It's just not appropriate for you or for you or for you. So just taking that and pinpointing that information can actually change a weight loss program of being just ho-hum to making it quite profound. So again, toxic environment. Again, we're finding that people are coming in with all manner of symptoms, and it might be as simple as asking them not to charge their mobile phone next to their bed every night. And you'll learn a little bit more about the toxic environment stuff with some of the other people that we've got here. But that can be profoundly life-changing for people, and all of a sudden their body starts to respond and does what it needs to do because it's not so busy being challenged by electromagnetic stuff and poor food choices or inflammation because they've just got a leaky gut and they can't process anything. All of a sudden, we build this up and we get a better story. And then, of course, sleep. I mean, how many people just don't sleep well? And remember, that's our repair time. That's the time when we're asleep and our body is supposed to repair. It's not supposed to be, violently and aggressively digesting food. It's not supposed to be, have a spiked cortisol level where you just can't calm down and you can't chill and get to the point of repairing your body. So all of these things come into how do you actually lose the weight and you keep it off. Well, all of these factors have to come into this. It can't be just a singular offering. And then, of course, maintain healthy hydration and the correct functional imbalances, which you need to determine through testing and all the other things that you can do in order to determine what position you sit in and what's it looking like. Whoops. Okay, so the way that the particular diet that I used, for many years I used to write, and I still do. I write very specific dietary plans for people. All of my plans are always, it's 3 meals a day. It's food that they'd find in their pantry, and if they don't, we have to go find it, but it's not weird and wonderful. And it's never been strange or unusual. But what happened with the T360 doc is they actually came and they packaged it. They packaged it up to make it a little bit more sensible and to allow us to be able to identify, first of all, whether our patient was in ketosis. And when we say ketosis, we mean a mild form of ketosis. Again, we're not talking about these massive spikes. All we're interested in doing is creating a mild ketotic situation where the body, and as I explained to my patients, snacks on itself. So we want it to snack on itself. That's all we want it to do, and this is why the utilization of fat or for fuel is so effective. So with regard to this is actually just showing that we use some keto sticks. They're not the most effective in the world, but what they do tell us is whether somebody is in ketosis. We start them on the program. Day 3, we actually have them checking their urine, just to give us a mild idea of what's going on and whether they're doing the snacky thing. And again, one part of the particular program with this is that we have 2 formulas. One is for the male, one is for the female, and they are broken down into different kinds of protein and carb components. And then we teach them actually how to do 2 things. One is they can either make up their own meals, and as I said, it's a breakfast, lunch, dinner scenario, as well as 4 drinks a day, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then in addition to that, they have to then just test their urine to make sure that they're in ketosis. But the most important thing that I want you to take away from this is it's regular, normal food. And at the end of the program, we run them in lots of 5-week programs. Then we reassess whether we need to keep going. But then we take them back into a normal situation, which is what they were doing anyway. So we're not changing anything. What we want them to do is continue on eating like this, because it's, you don't do something weird and wonderful and then come back to reality. Reality has to be from the beginning. So we're sorting them out from a health perspective, and then we're using this as a tool, and then off we go. And this is just an example of the types of proteins that you can actually partake in. So it's pretty much everything. The only thing that I would change is if I identify with a patient that they have some intolerances or sensitivities or downright allergies, and then we may actually make a suggestion that we take those foods out. It's going to make this process a lot easier. But what I really wanted to illustrate is just literally, beef and veal, cheese, chicken, eggs, and so forth and so on. It's all available to them. Again, unless there are sensitivities that we need to address. And then all the information is there. We have the portion size and we have the portions and the carbs. So again, some examples of some carbs, and the carb list is quite extensive. We don't tend to try to take things away from people unless they have a dramatic effect on the diet, and there aren't too many things that do. But what you won't see on this diet, of course, is you're not going to see bread, at least right now. You're not going to see a huge component of dairy, particularly if we address that the patient has some dairy issues. But other than that, it's pretty much it's okay. And again, some more carbs. And then some other bits and pieces. We're very generous with different kinds of herbs. Culturally, this diet works beautifully with any culture. It just fits into it nicely. We can always find something to make it work. One of the things that I wanted to mention here is that we have a little drink that we use with regard to this diet, and it exists for one purpose and one purpose only, really. It is a protein shot. It's not an appetite suppressant. We're not trying to change the biology of what the body's doing and its responses to that. We're not trying to do that at all. What we're trying to do is just make sure that the blood sugar levels, there are no dips. What we want to do is keep it completely steady. And if we keep it steady, then what we're going to do is get into a ketotic situation a lot faster than we would if we didn't do that. It's very easy to do, one before breakfast or during breakfast, one at 10 o'clock in the morning-ish, lunchtime, one at 2, one at 4 at dinner, and then you're done. So what it does is it just keeping their glucose levels very stable. It takes any of the cravings away. It takes those crashes that people typically experience after they eat. It takes all of that away. So these are really handy, and they taste good too. So what we want to do is learn correct food habits. As I mentioned before, portion control is absolutely huge. I mean, if you look at the way that Buddhists eat, who are very dedicated to their faith, food is as important as anything else they will do. So they will take a bite of their food, they'll put the fork down, they'll think about it, they'll experience it, they'll taste it. But one of the ethics is they'll make sure that that food is completely, utterly liquid before it actually gets swallowed. Wonderful thing for digestion. A wonderful thing to correct digestion and absorption imbalances is simply just to eat a lot slower. Detox the body. So we want to use the fat for fuel. So we want a mild ketotic state. We don't want to be over the top. We just want something mild. You're going to lose fat. You're going to maintain some muscle mass. Control the blood sugar. I mean, again, I would say right now on average 2 in 5 patients that I see right now are all pre-diabetic. And if they're not pre-diabetic, they're actually diabetic and they don't know it. And then there's another component that kind of know it, but they're still ignoring it. But we'll address the diabetic story. I think I'm doing that later. So we'll talk about that later. Pinpoint nutritional deficiencies, super important. If you don't pinpoint them, even with this diet, if we're still allowing people to do this, they're in an inflammatory position and you're not going to get the results that you want. But the minute that you identify these things, the body just has this epiphany. It just goes, aha, awesome. I'm going to let go of this weight. I don't need to hold on to it anymore. And then correct functional imbalances, determine food intolerances, and what we need to do is normalize all the key biomarkers. The other thing that I use quite extensively is something called a WICO. How many people are familiar with that? Okay. That was something that was actually developed to work alongside the T360. And basically it's 15 inflammatory markers that tell us where the patient is with regard to inflammation and how their systems are functioning. And we get them to take it at the beginning, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. And then we get them to take it again at the end of the program. Sometimes, even though someone may have extensive amounts of weight to lose, I like to, let's say they were on the program for 10 weeks instead of 5. We'll do one at the beginning. I like to do one mid-diet plan, and then I'll do one at the end. Mostly because I just want to continue to highlight to the patient the enormous changes that they're making. And I want to pinpoint. I want them to be saying the words to me that some of these symptoms are going away. Their foggy brain, their inability to stretch, their sleeping habits, their toilet habits. I want to see that there are improvements to that. And I want them to realize that by doing this test successively, and then they can kind of see that. Just coming back to this, again, lowering the toxic environment, that situation where I mentioned somebody's continually charging their phone next to their bed. This person had a lot of headaches, a lot of aches and pains and so forth, just by simply moving the phone into another room and the computer and all the cords and things, some things improved. So we want to look at the toxic, or the EMF, non-toxic cosmetics and hair products. Wow. We put them on ourselves all the time. Skin's the largest organ. Where do you think it's going? So again, for some people, not all, but for some, for some with the cosmetics and the hair products, they're just very, very sensitive individuals. So it really does affect their overall health. And again, a lot of their inflammatory conditions, we can actually tie back to some of this. Drugs and medication. I always ask patients to bring everything they're taking and everything they're thinking of taking. And they come in with suitcases. And they shake it all out, and I'm thinking, and I love to, and I'm not trying to shame them, but what I want to know is I'll hold up stuff and I'll say, how come you're taking this? I don't know, have no idea. Or we'll divide all of their prescribed medication, and we'll divide it up into groups, and we'll kind of have a good hard look at it. And what we'll find is they've got 5 of almost the same thing. They're taking 5 of almost the same medication, just because that's the way it's come down and that's what they're doing. Now, on top of that, they're experiencing side effects that are purely 100% from the meds. Diminish the meds, take some of them away, and you'll often find that they get better and they stop having those symptoms. So we have to look at the drugs, and of course then the over-the-counter stuff too. I mean, people are crazy. We're self-medicating. We self-medicate with our vitamins. We self-medicate with all the things we think, we do our research and we're in there taking them. Usually when I treat somebody, more often than not, I take away most of their stuff and we start again. Because my view is they have very, very expensive PP. And it's all in the bowl, because the body doesn't distinguish. It doesn't receive all of this and say, I'll have a little of that, I'll have a little of this, and end of conversation. It doesn't do that. It just goes, this is just too much. This is overwhelming. And it just tends to excrete the lot. So you don't get to use the value and the goodness. So treating someone from a nutritive perspective first, and then see what happens. The body kind of gets its act together, and all of a sudden, as I said, these deficiencies that you thought existed actually don't exist anymore. They're mild. So you want to let the body then try to get its act together a little bit more. And then, of course, we always want to work on a microcapillary circulation level. We want to go to the lowest level, stimulating level that we can, because, our cells are kind of important. Without them, we won't survive, but we have to look after them. So being able to provide treatments to be able to get to that level is, again, where we're going with this whole preventative stuff. And it's amazing the results that we're getting with that. Okay, we talked about sleep. We need that time. Again, most of the people that have to lose significant amounts of weight are terrible sleepers. They're terrible, terrible sleepers. So we have to figure out a way to, as they start to lose the weight, we've also got to identify that they're in a habitual behavior. Their body's kind of used to not sleeping. So we have to try to focus. When I have a patient come in and I'm like, how's the sleeping? I'm often checking up on that first and foremost, because if they're still not sleeping well, you've got all the things that are going to happen that should be happening while they're sleeping aren't happening. So again, it's this big stop sign for actually losing the weight that they need to lose. At the very least, we know not getting enough increases your appetite, and it also increases your cravings for carbohydrates and sugar. We know that. So if you're not sleeping, you wonder why you're trying to dive into the various things. It's because this biochemical thing's not happening. You're not getting the break at night, and your body's making you think this is what you need. And then again, of course, sleep deprivation causes elevated blood sugar, and we just have to get back to that. Once you're, by the way, in slight ketosis, you find that often your sleeping is much better. Has anyone experienced that? Done a little ketotic work and then found that you could sleep a little bit better? Yeah. The body likes being in a state of it likes ketones in its system. The brain loves it. So we need to, mildly have that as an outcome, I think, on and off for your whole life. Well, I don't even have to tell you about this one, but healthy hydration is incredibly important. What's rather interesting is I think the Chinese got it right, because what they worked out is you'll never see someone from that part of the world actually drinking cold water They always drink hot tea whenever they eat food. Always, always hot tea or hot water with lemon, because they believe that if you put cold water in on top of food, it congeals and it makes digestion much more difficult. This is the WICO score that I was talking about, that we actually do before we put them on the T360. And then, as I said, I like to do one midway, and then we do one at the end. It looks at these 15, as I said, these 15 inflammatory markers, and it gives you a score. So you give a login to your client or your patient goes in, they do it. They get a score, and what you do is get the breakdown as the practitioner, so you get to sit down and explain it. And then if you've been doing this long enough, you can actually start to pinpoint where you believe you're going to start to see some changes for them. And you get them to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and we go through it, and we highlight where they're making, where they're challenges, and we also highlight where we're going to continue to move forward with it. So we're going to have a breakdown of that tomorrow, though, yeah? And then stress. Again, there was Al put me on to a gentleman that said something really rather interesting. I think he said that, 100 years ago, the stress levels between now and 100 years ago are quite different. We have more stress in one day than 100 years ago they had stress in 1 year. So no wonder we're not functioning. No wonder we don't feel well. And again, coming back to stress with regard to all the hormone activity, it makes us hungry. We want sugar. We need to help our adrenals. They're not functioning very well. They're overwhelmed. And so, again, from a nutritive perspective, we're trying to load up and make a difference. And again, then it becomes habitual. You can't get out of that behavior psychologically no matter what you want to do. It's kind of like drinking alcohol. People say, you shouldn't drink alcohol, it's bad. Well, sure, everything in moderation. What people don't realize, though, is that it's the alcohol that sets you up for this massive carb craving. It's a biochemical thing that happens, and when you wake up in the morning, you have French fries in your bed or a pizza. It's coming from the fact that you may have only had one drink. You were a good girl or a good boy. It's just that there's this psychological need to have these carbs, so it kind of sets you up. This is why we typically take alcohol away from people when they're on a dietary plan. And again, we don't make any time for meditation. How many people really take the time to go for a walk in the park and get outside and get some sunshine and do all of that? We don't do it. All of this is going to reflect very much on sustained weight loss. And again, talking to people about exercise, one of the things that you gotta love what you're doing. If you're forcing yourself to go to the gym and that's not your deal, then you're not going to enjoy it. You're not going to be in the headspace for it. There's already something that's been set up from a negative perspective. So it's not going to be fun for you. So you're not going to bust your butt to get out of bed and go and do these things. So for many people, I'm just find something. And you know what? Even if it's just walking, I just need you to move. And for the people who really find that their time is difficult, I'll say, well, you watch TV every day, and they're like, yeah, I try to manage the news or whatever. I say, then fine, march in place in front of the TV. But just move. But make sure you like what you're doing. And again, healthy fats, we know what they all are. We know that we should be having, certain kinds of nuts and avocado and, fatty fish. We should be eating healthy, but we're not going to overdo it. This is not the kind of ketogenic diet that we're talking about here. We're not talking about high-level, unhealthy fats. We're talking about just the healthy ones. We've really come around to what we know about the ingestion of fats. I think that, unfortunately, the hardcore keto story is still out there. We're seeing that, on social media. We're seeing that in the TV. And we've really got to get out of that place because we've really come a long way. The data is very different now in terms of the type of fat that we should ingest and when we should ingest it and the benefits that we should get. And so, again, coming back to consuming healthy fats, not too much. Again, we're going to put ourselves in that state where we're using our body fat as fuel. Do you want me to read that? If you decide to go on a diet, this was a really good idea. Someone said to put all your trigger foods in a bag when you're ready to start your new amazing, story with regard to your diet. Put your trigger foods in a bag and go give them to somebody, a homeless person. Now, the downside of that is that we're going to give them all the garbage. But the good side is that it's going to be out of your refrigerator. And that's about it. I thank you for your time, and if you have any questions later, let me know. Thank you. You're welcome.
So, Dr. Kate, over the past, since we're running behind, I'm not going to do questions, but just want to let you know, Dr. Kate, over the past 25 years, has been looking at so many diets, and what she has done is really understand the process of what's going to work so that people can sustain over time. That's the key issue, is that you don't harm yourself, and you can sustain the success over time because you really understand food. Our objective with all these presentations is to give you a understanding of some of the issues that are out there, and then tomorrow give you some of the solutions. Stress, as an example, you can see is such a major problem for everybody, but there are some simple solutions that we're going to talk about and introduce you to programs that can help address that.